looks like we've kind of stabilized. We got 23 attendees.
And if you want me to go ahead and just go on this, let me know when I should go on the screen share. I've got this up and I can pull up our.
Oh, and here's James.
There's the man.
Perfect timing.
Look at that.
Excellent timing, James.
James, how are you?
Good. Sorry that I was late, Alex. I hope you got my email.
I did.
Good.
We're all set.
Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. We were just, catching up. I mean, as well as we can be doing in the middle of the pandemic, but overall, as I was saying to the other members, phenomenal just because of this phenomenal staff of folks I get to work with every day who do a great job. So, I got good people, so things are going well because of them. So hanging in there.
Good.
Great.
All right, we're ready to share.
We're live, and if you'll share your screen, Jacob, I'll go ahead and start with the introduction.
Okay.
Shouting out into the ether.
Very good.
It's very difficult to do this without being able to see the public faces, but I'll go ahead and welcome everybody to the August 12th virtual meeting of the Board of Architectural Review Large for the City of Charleston. My name is Jay White. I'm acting as chair this evening. Other board members that are present this afternoon are James Metters and Leon Scott. And then representing city staff, we have Jacob Lindsay, Alex Howell, and Lawrence Courtney. And as a reminder, the order of the meeting is as follows. First, there will be an introduction and brief overview of the project by city staff. This would be Jacob speaking here. And then the application will be presented by the applicant. We'll shoot for a 10-minute time limit. If you need more time for your presentation, then please alert me. And depending upon my disposition in that moment, I may grant additional time. That will be followed by any questions to the applicant by the board or staff. Any presenters, please state your name for the record whenever you speak, just because of the nature of the online meeting. And also keep in mind that any persons that are affiliated with the project, whether you're the owner, developer, contractor, or consultant, please speak during this period rather than during public comment. The applicant's presentation will be followed by an equivalent amount of time for public comment. And then after that, there'll be the city staff comments and recommendation. This will be followed by a couple of minutes for an applicant response or clarification to either public comment or the city staff comments. And then once that is concluded, we'll proceed to board discussion and a vote. At this point, the applicant can clarify any inaccurate information when recognized by me as the chair, raise a hand in the Zoom fashion and wait to be called on. But otherwise, you should only speak if you're asked a question by a board member. None of our items this evening have been withdrawn or deferred. Please remember to turn off all cell phones or other devices. If you're playing video games in the background, we do not want to hear that. So please limit your comments to architecture only. This board's jurisdiction is limited to that, not zoning or issues of trash collection or noise or rowdy students. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lindsay to proceed to the first item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to just first of all say thank you to all the board members and to the staff, and that it's a real honor to be here, and especially in Mr. Dowd's absence. As you all know, my friend and colleague Dennis Dowd served for many years as the city staff lead for this board, and until we acquire a new city architect and that search is completed, you'll be seeing myself as well as Mr. Courtney and our wonderful additional staff, Linda Bennett and Alex Howell, who all contribute to this wonderful effort that is the Board of Architectural Review. So thanks for letting me assist, and it's good to be with you all. Just a technical question here, because I'm running from a multi-monitor screen. Are you all seeing my full screen share? Or are you seeing the PowerPoint with the slides at the side? Can you guide me there?
The screen share is on your other screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just reshare that, and hopefully I can get that correctly shared. Okay, how about now?
Yep, there you go.
Beautiful. Okay, very good. Well, we'll go ahead and get things started off here, and we'll move to our next slide. Okay. So, Mr. Chair, do you want to read this, or is this for me to go through all of our overall instructions?
I think we have to do rock, paper, scissors to figure that out. I mean, I can go over it very quickly. This has been the city's protocol for use of Zoom for virtual board meetings for now several weeks. So any of you who are frequent participants or observers will recognize this. But if you're here, you've already found the link to online access. There's a phone number there that you can call if you are having trouble with that. The public comment instructions are pretty important. You will have needed to alert the city by noon yesterday if you were going to request an opportunity to speak. Members of the public that intend to speak this evening on any application are already known by Alex Howell, and he will cue you up to turn your microphone on, and I guess video as well if you have it, so that you can speak on the application of your interest, and then that'll be it. We have a number. This is not on the screen before you, but we have a number of public comments that have been submitted in writing. And it's pertinent to say that submitting your comments in writing to the board or to the city is every bit as valid of public participation as speaking live here tonight. So I think we can go on from here. And I'll read this too. So staff being Mr. Lindsay is controlling the PowerPoint. Applicants will need to ask him to advance slides according to the pace of their presentation. Please, if you're speaking, give your name at each occasion in which you speak. That'll just make the audio recording all the more accurate and clear. Attendees' videos and microphones have all been disabled. And when Alex cues you up to speak, then you can turn on both. Some applicants have been confused thinking that they only have audio access. You can turn on your camera when you go live to present before the board. It's much better than having a disembodied voice. Chat and QA functions have been disabled for everyone. And then again, for public comment, for those of you who have registered in accordance with what you saw on the last slide, you'll be called in order by project to speak on that. And please, after you speak, remain for the rest of the item so you can understand what occurs. There are occasions where an applicant will pull an application right in the midst of proceedings, and you won't have known that unless you stay until a motion is made and passed. Let's see. Board members are listed as participants, and we have the ability to open a panel that shows each board member, and we can see the status of each of our microphones. I think most of us will probably stay muted until it's time to talk, just for audio clarity. All right, next. And for those of us on the board, please remember that when we make our vote, please say either yay in favor or nay not in favor, just for absolute audio clarity. And I'm going to reread the motion verbatim, and whichever board member has made the motion will need to correct me if I'm off. We're looking for accuracy in the motions. I don't think we have any recusals tonight, but so I'll skip over that part. And it's extremely rare that the board ever goes into executive session, but should we do that, we will sort of step aside here and convene via a conference line, and then return to the Zoom meeting after that executive session has concluded. You can go to the city's website to see results of this meeting, and then there's additional contact information, especially if you're having technical problems. And do keep in mind that all of this is being recorded. All right, next.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. With that introduction, we will go ahead and move on to our first agenda item. And agenda item number 1 is 529 King Street. And this is simply a 1-year extension of an existing approval for demolition of the existing structure. Now, this was originally granted in October 11th, 2017. This is not a rated building. It was built around 1948, and it's in the old and historic district. And for those of you who know this site, this is here on Upper King Street. This, of course, was Dixie Furniture. And the staff comments is that first, this is the second extension of the demolition approval originally granted. And by ordinance, this may be granted for 1 year up to 5 times after the 2-year expiration date. So our recommendation is for approval and the extension of the demo.
Okay. Is there an applicant presentation for this one, Alex?
Not really. We have someone
Okay.
on the line, but if there's any questions, but not really necessary.
Well, I'm sure that someone would love to speak, but we may just proceed on to board discussion if that's all right. Any board discussion or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, this is James. I will make a motion for approval of the
Okay.
demolition project extension.
Okay, so we have a motion for approval of the extension of the demolition. Do we have a second?
I will second. This is Leon Scott.
Okay. All right. That said, we have a motion that has been made and seconded. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Aye in favor.
Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yea in favor?
And I vote yay in favor, so the motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to agenda item number 2, 98 Wentworth. This is also a demolition of a one-story building known as Croft Hall. This is in Charleston Village. It was built after 1959, and of course, it's in the old and historic district. This is located on Wentworth Street, immediately adjacent to the Grace Church Cathedral. And there are just a few street-level photographs of the existing building. You can see it here in relationship, obviously, to the main cathedral itself and Wentworth Street. And this is just the building in question all the way to the left, looking down Wentworth and looking in the other direction. Here you see it on your right. And with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant's presentation.
All right, we have 3 applicant presenters. I'm going to promote Simmons Young to a panelist, Susan Carter and Michael Wright.
Okay, I think I'm in. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we
We
can.
can.
Just one clarification. Jay, you mentioned raise your hand. Is that literally this if you have a comment? Or is there a...
No, you have to dance if you can't. Yeah, no, since you're on video, please just like literally raise your hand, wave it about, and we'll find it.
Okay, sounds good.
But you have the floor, so you don't have to do it right now.
Sounds good. So if we could go to the first slide. This will be followed by another application right after this. The building is 1959. We could go to the next slide. And these slides are sort of small, so if you see me squinting at the screen, that's what it is. This is just a survey showing the existing building, and then Grace, this was done in 2000. This survey was done in 2000. So you don't see a courtyard that's between the cathedral and the, what's the Johnson building. So it's just sort of a big white mass, and the building highlighted to the left is Croft Hall. We go to the next slide. These are some Sanborn maps. The building was built in 1959, and it was kind of an afterthought when the Johnson building to the east of the cathedral was built. One of the donors for that building was really intent on having a youth club building, and so he donated some money to have this built, and it was not built all that well. It's just concrete block and some stucco, shingle roof. There's a fireplace that was never built, and currently it serves as part of Grace Little School, and it's divided into 4 smaller classrooms. Okay, and then we could go to the next slide. These are the 1959 drawings showing Croft Hall, and on the lower left, if it's possible to zoom in, that'd be great. If not, I'll just mention it. To the left of the cathedral, there is a building that'll be maybe relevant for the next presentation, which is a building that was demolished, a 3-story building to the left, and you can see that's dashed in. That was demolished when they built Croft Hall. And we could go to the next slide, which is just a few photos of the building, and I think we're already oriented to that. And hopefully had a chance to ride, or I'm sure you've seen this building driving around town or stop by today. And I think that may be the last slide. Yeah. So with that, I would open it up to any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board or staff?
Jay, I went by the building today, and Simmons, it appears this is a concrete block building that maybe has a brick veneer on the outside and then stuccoed. And I mean, from structural standpoint, I mean, it looks fine. There's still windows to it. There's these cast pieces around the windows, but it is a concrete block building with maybe a brick veneer and then stucco. And but this is not because the building is not in good condition. It's just there's not a lot of significant unique qualities about it. Correct?
That's correct, and we do have a need for a new use that does require some more space.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board or staff? If not, we will proceed on to public comment. Is there any public comment on this one, Alex?
No public comment on the demolition.
Oh man, it's my favorite part. All right, well, let's move on then to city recommendation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. City comments, staff comments are, first of all, that it's a basic utilitarian structure, as was just mentioned. It has few character-defining architectural elements, contributing little to the neighborhood and the city. And if there are any reusable architectural elements that are salvageable, they should be removed and stored for possible future use elsewhere. So staff recommendation is for approval for demolition with any special architectural elements to be salvaged.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Young, any response to that?
We will salvage the steel windows and look at how the cast stone can come out and get into it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so board discussion.
Motion, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, sure, go right ahead.
Make a motion for approval of the demolition of the structure, including staff comments.
So motion for approval of demolition, including staff comments. Do we have a second?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Thank you. Sorry, y'all are just going to be tag teaming this all night, I'm afraid. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Scott?
Yay in favor.
I vote yay in favor as well. The motion passes 3-0.
Okay, very good, Mr. Chair. Hearing no other words on that, we'll move on to our third agenda item, which is also at the same address. This is the future building proposed to go in the same location, 98 Wentworth Street. So this is a conceptual approval request for new construction of a two-story addition to the existing church complex. The existing church is in fact a category 1, which of course is our most significant designation for historic buildings. It is in a 3-story height district and of course the old and historic district. So just as the previous site, same location here on Wentworth Street, which we just viewed. Again, the site here is in the location of the building that you just approved for demolition on the left, here on the right. And with that, I'll turn it over to the applicant for presentation.
Okay, the Dean and Rector, Michael Wright, will introduce the project and the background on it if that's, if we could switch over to him, please, Alex.
They are both at panelists and they just need to unmute, mute themselves.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Very good. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I'm just going to just briefly begin the process by saying, related to the need of this this building, this is not a new need. This is a need that probably is almost a generation it's taken for us to get to this point. You may recall a number of years ago, we were at the point of building or requesting a similar type of building. And it's at that time when we discovered the tower was unstable at Grace. And so about 15 years later and $12 million later, we stabilized the building and it's back the way it needs to be. We're now at the point where we have to look at the original need, which is more space because of our growing congregation. As it turns out, when we looked at this about 15 years ago, the membership was about 1,575 people. and the need was raised for additional space for all of our community and congregational work. Now, 15 years later, our membership is 3,250. So this has been an ongoing need related to growth, not about expected growth, but actually being able to service the needs of the community and the congregation at the present time. And so just to give you that introduction is to say, this is not something that's we've raised recently. It's been an ongoing discussion, and we're thrilled that we've now made it to this point that we can come before you with something a little more tangible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll move into the architecture of the building. We started working on this in about a year and a half ago, and really gathering programming needs more than defining a building, which didn't happen till much later. So if we could go to the next slide, the cathedral is 1846. These Sanborn maps tell an interesting story. The outlined building on the upper left is the cathedral, and then actually in this Sanborn map, east is shown as up. On the corner of Glebe and Wentworth Street, there was a 4-story structure. And then in 1902, the upper right-hand side, there was a 3-story structure, the one that we looked at that was demoed when Croft Hall was built. That was approximately 15 feet away from the cathedral, if the drawing was scaled correctly in 1959. So there's been an evolution of buildings. In late 1990s, there was an addition on the back of the cathedral. And again, the 2 1959 sort of flankers. One is Johnson Hall, which houses the current gathering hall, and the other has part of the little school. We could go to the next slide. So this is just a rendering, and then enlarged Sanborn showing those 2 buildings in particular that I spoke about that were close, and then another building to the west, which was 2 stories on a raised basement with an attic, and we'll see a photo on the next slide. So this is looking from the east with the, I guess they mark it as 4 stories. It looks kind of like 3 stories over an 8-foot, 7 or 8 foot raised basement. That's sort of blocking the view of the cathedral. I think they're probably standing where the fraternity row is, roughly. We could go to the next slide. This is probably standing, the slide on the right, the image on the right is probably standing somewhere near the front of Glenn McConnell, the College Charleston dormitory. You can see that 2.5-story building on the left. It's all the way pushed up against the street, and then sort of a raggedy wooden fence, and then a cast iron or wrought iron fence that was in front of the cathedral. And apparently there was a 3-story building pushed back approximately 50 feet from the street where that ratty fence is. We could go to the next slide. This is the just a site plan, sort of orienting everything. You can see Croft Hall in relation to the building in that site context. And it's just worth noting that the College of Charleston has the dorm I just mentioned, and then also their student center, Stern Center, and some other larger buildings nearby. So it's sort of a mixed neighborhood in here. We could go to the next, please. Then, the photo on the, we'll just go clockwise from the upper left, is coming down Wentworth Street with the spire of the cathedral in the distance, some College of Charleston buildings blocking a little bit of the view. To the right of that is a parking lot that we share with the College of Charleston. We own the first row of spaces. We have an easement allowing access through, which will become important when we look at the site plan. And then Croft Hall in the front of the building with the cloister on the lower right, and Johnson Hall on the lower right. Go to the next, please. Upper left is Glenn McConnell dorm. To the right of that is just looking down Wentworth Street with the 3-story college building that's being currently braced. and the fraternity row. We could go to the next slide. And just stop me if you all want to look closer at photos. These are kind of from the back of the building. There's a 1990s edition that is a drive under with the choir room and choir director's office above them. You'll note the playground for the little school is kind of pushed up against the building, and it's not really a safe way for kids to get back and forth. There's some of the little schools in the older building and some of it is in Croft Hall. So if you go out there, you sort of, the kids push out an exit, a fire stair, escape exit that goes straight into that drive-through. So that's one of the things we want to ameliorate. Now the next slide. Some more context, and you'll see this, I think, in a site plan a little bit easier, which I'll get to. Next slide. So this is sort of an overall view to give you kind of a quick glimpse of what the agenda is here. We started with 4 design principles that we stuck with sort of throughout that we felt were important. The first is that the cathedral is the most significant building and everything should defer to it. The second is that the massing on Wentworth Street should be complementary to the Johnson building on the right. However, the building must be larger to accommodate the growing congregation and administrative needs. It's worth mentioning currently the clergy and administration is in a building diagonally across the street at 115 Wentworth, so it's about a half a block walk. Another design principle is that the interior experience of the parish hall and the offices should have a strong visual connection to the cathedral. One of the things about the gathering hall, I'm fortunate to spend a lot of Sundays there. I'm a member of the congregation, but the gathering hall that's in the Johnson building on the right is pretty disconnected from the cathedral, and we've got the opportunity with this one to look out at just an incredible west facade with stained glass windows and stucco and looking at the back of this spire. And then also the offices, you'll see, have that opportunity. We could go to the next slide. And this is just a survey. One thing worth noting, again, the parking spaces you see on the left were acquired in 2000 when we started this campaign for a new building. And beneath them is a tunnel that carries power from the central plant for the College of Charleston over to Glenn McConnell Dorm. So it's not simply parking. There's 2 transformers in that little island and then a manhole that's under there. So that's an interesting easement thing. We could go to the next, yeah. The proposed building is sited, the siting shown here. We are, the idea is that we're more narrow at the front. So the building is about 7 feet 4 inches at the front, and then as it gets behind a cloister, it widens up. There's a ramp on the left-hand side from handicap accessible parking places that bring you to kind of the entry point for the gathering hall up front, and then at the back of the building, this is sort of the everyday use. If I were going to go drop my kids at choir, or if you were going to go to discuss a funeral or plan a wedding or whatever that might be, that function might be, that's probably the door that you would use. And it's got sort of the guts in the building in the back with bathrooms and kitchens. And I think we'll hear a little bit later about the kitchen need and what the church does in this building from Susan Carter. A lot of the little school gets pushed into the older building, and the playground goes to the top of the site, and the parking lot gets shrunk a little bit. So the little school is all now grouped together, which is, I think, very helpful, and it's a safer entry onto the playground. And the kids are more protected in the back of the building. We could go to the next slide, please. The floor plan, I think I just talked about that. influence of the floor plan, you can see the pilasters of the cathedral. Those sort of carry across with beams and columns, and also the windows we'll see in the elevations align with the center lines of the stained glass windows. And we could, I think, go to the next slide. This is the second floor that has the clergy offices, and it has this double height space that opens to the hall below. There's a storefront that separates it for privacy reasons, but the idea is that if you're in these offices, if you're in your clergy, you sort of recognize that you work at a cathedral, and it's very visible. It's right there, so you can sort of, I think, appreciate that connection. Again, the guts of the building are sort of in the back with bathrooms, stairs, elevators, reception, and the connection, of course, to the 1990s building. In 1998, it was important to define, and still is important to define, the back corner of the building. You'll see that the walls of the existing building are in gray and the new building are in black. So you'll see that jog at the northwest corner of the cathedral that was done intentionally to define the corner of this building. And if you go back and look at the photos, the top of the parapet of the new 1998 building is about a foot higher than the eave of the clear story of the cathedral. There's a one-story part of the building that you saw probably on the first floor that has the kitchen, and that's the part that goes into the courtyard a bit. The courtyard is 25 feet wide, and there's the one-story kitchen, and we felt that was important to, again, show the corner and feature that corner of the building. The cloister is approximately the same size. I think it's 38 feet from our building to the base of cathedral side aisle, and on the other side it's 42 feet. So there's a little bit of play that we have to do, which you'll see on the next slide, please. Roof plan. We bump up, and we'll see this more in elevation, but we bump up in a couple places. The next slide, please. So the streetscape view, I think looking on the north side of the street at the top of the page, you can see the existing addition. We actually join up in the middle of those two windows at the very back in the distance, sort of a light gray color. And then the new building is a bit shorter than that. The guiding principle is the eave line of the clear story, which is at about 38 feet. We're sticking it right below that, 37 something, 37.4 for the parapet of the main building. And then as we get closer to the cathedral, we step down about 5 feet approximately for that side bay that's pushed back behind the cloister. So the idea is, as you get closer to the cathedral, you push back and you step down. You probably can't see my hands, but I'm making motions. On the next side of the street, yeah, next slide is fine. The other side of the street, you just see the outline of the building and its massing in comparison. We could go to the next slide. So on this elevation, we felt it was important to leave the Gothic arches to the cathedral. We have sort of a segmented arch on our side on this building. It's a three-part division of the front part of the building, three-part windows in the dean's office, ganged windows, and a little bit of relief to the elevation where pilasters stick out. The cloister is we're trying to make it exactly the same as far as architectural detailing as the one on the right side of the building. It's a rare place that you see both these things at the same time. So we think the dimensional difference is not going to be picked up on a regular day. We could move, I think, to the next slide. Okay, on the top of this page is the north elevation, which faces the Stern Center. There is a central atrium, which was the 1998 building. You can see sort of the drive-through arch, drive-under building, which we've filled in order to pick up some of the little school program. And then those windows are where the lobby, elevator lobby is, and the covered entry as you move to the right. In the bottom elevation, the west elevation, we've got windows. The idea is that those windows align with the stained glass windows. And again, you sort of have two masses on either end with a lower structure in the middle. That those parapets pop up about 1 foot 4 inch on each side of the central gathering space. Storage on the left, so we have a little bit of a, yeah, that's fine. We could go to the next slide.
Apologies, too quick on the draw.
That's okay. This slide is useful because it shows the top section. If I'd been thinking when we put all this together, we would have slid over a little bit more because it does show the 38 foot, it would show the 38 foot top of a clear story wall. That's what you're seeing is a 23 foot top of side aisle highlighted in black there. And this just shows some of the spatial relationships and that ceiling height on the first floor. We live with a rather low ceiling and a strange proportioned room over hand-in-hand hall. And now when we plan on this building, we want something that, you know, that has a better ceiling height and proportion. Particularly in the gathering hall, double height space. You can see how that relates, the glass wall relates to the cathedral. And beneath that, sort of the 3-part division for the side bay that's behind the cloister. And you can see where it pops up in the back for the parapet wall. Are we doing okay on time, Jay?
Well, you could accelerate a little bit. I was just about to, I didn't want to interrupt your flow, but it could go faster.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. I think we're pretty close to the end. Perspectives. And we could go to the next one. And I can come back to any of these if you have questions about them. The side ramp, I guess, is important to talk about that allows the handicap access, wheelchair access up to the front door of the building. And I think that may be the last slide. Is that?
It is.
Is that right? Okay. So I will open it to questions there.
Yeah, great. All right. Any board or staff questions?
Simmons, what was your, this is James, sorry. What was your first principle, your first design principle?
That the cathedral is the most significant building and that other parts of the campus should defer to it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, well, let's move on to public comment. I know we have a couple of letters, one in particular, I think both, but I think that rather than read the letter, I think both the Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society have people in the audience. So I guess we'll move on to verbal public comment, and then I'll read a letter into the record.
All right, we'll start with Anna Catherine Carroll, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on this project. And first, we feel that this is a successful design approach that is quite compatible with the existing architecture on the site. However, we are concerned that the mass of the addition as proposed would crowd the historic church building. To provide space between the buildings and to preserve significant streetscape views of the church, we would like to see the new courtyard be of a similar width to that of the existing courtyard to the east. To achieve this, we feel a 3-bay wide addition as represented by the primary facade of the addition would be most appropriate in this location. But at the very least, we would encourage efforts to minimize and narrow the east wing of the proposed addition to help the courtyard widths be more similar. And we also feel that there's an opportunity to bring the overall height of the addition down by at least a foot by minimizing the height of the cornice. And together, these revisions we feel would help the addition relate more sensitively to this important Category 1 building while still allowing this growing congregation to achieve their programmatic needs. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
And then we have one other, Will Hamilton, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alex. This is Will Hamilton with Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd also like to thank the applicant for giving us an opportunity to review the design ahead of this afternoon's meeting. We feel as though the proposed design for this addition is successful in regards to the general architectural direction, but there are a few notable items we feel need to be addressed during this phase of the design review process. We feel the design for the east facade facing the church works well. However, we would prefer to see more of the proposed glass treatment at the large blank stucco panels located at the second floor southeast corner of the proposed addition. We feel these panels will be more cohesive if glass treatment is included here as well. Comparable to the Preservation Society, we'd also request the proposed addition be moved further away from the church to provide for more visual prominence for the historic church. And in doing so, result in similarly sized courtyards, which would be preferable. So in general, we're pleased with the direction of the design and hopeful the board will consider the previously mentioned recommendations when making their decision. Thank you.
Okay. Alex, do we have any other verbal comment before I read?
No other verbal comment, just the one letter.
Okay, well, let me read that into the record. This is from the Charleston Village Association.
There is one
Yes.
other letter from Susan Carter.
Okay, was she part of the applicant team, or is she?
She's not yet spoken.
Okay, so, but she was part of the applicant presentation, correct?
Well, I went back and forth and said public comment would be best with Alex and Lawrence, because it's really the congregation's, we didn't want to submit 600 letters, so we put it in one letter.
Has that been submitted to the city at this point, or is Susan available to speak?
She is available.
It would probably be best that she then speak, because I don't have the letter here to read it.
Okay.
This is Susan Carter. I'm happy to read the letter.
Sure.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity. The letter is from Dean Michael Wright, People's Warden Barry Gum, and I am the Dean's Warden. So we thank you for this opportunity. Dear members of the Board of Architectural Review, on behalf of the members, clergy, and vestry of Grace Church Cathedral, we write to ask your support for the construction of a new cathedral hall and for the renovation of the 1959 Johnson Building, both at 98 Wentworth Street. Grace Church Cathedral is a vibrant, growing Episcopal church in the heart of downtown Charleston, adjacent to the College of Charleston and Mount Zion AME Church on Glebe Street. Admitted to the diocese in 1846, Grace Church was built in 1847 and enjoyed the membership of 60 parishioners. Under the leadership of Rector William Ray from 1902 to 1946, the church grew to 800 members. Rector Ralph Meadowcroft noted the membership was in excess of 1,000 people by the early 1960s. In 2005, the membership numbered 1,575, and today, under the leadership of Dean J. Michael A. Wright, the congregation numbers 3,250 individuals. 1,066 are communicants under the age of 16. In 2015, Grace Church became the cathedral for the Diocese of South Carolina. In 2019, the average Sunday attendance at Grace Church Cathedral was 820 worshipers. Over the course of the year, Holy Eucharist was celebrated 566 times. and 216 daily offices were offered in the cathedral. Hospitality. Each Sunday after the 9 and the 11 a.m. services, the hospitality committee prepares and serves refreshments for approximately 250 people per service to give members and visitors an opportunity to have some meaningful interaction. Community. In addition to
excuse me, Miss Carter, not to stop your flow, but considering the jurisdiction of the board, if you could speak to the architectural merit of the project, I think we have a sense of the programmatic need, but we study the architectural merit. So if you could speak to that a little more specifically, please.
Certainly.
You can just say you think it looks great.
I think it looks great. And I understand the community concerns. We're trying to maximize every little piece of property that we've got to support this vibrant church in downtown Charleston. So that said, we're delighted with it.
Great. Thank you. Alex, any other verbal comment before I read this letter in?
That should be it.
Okay. All right. Well, let me. I'll paraphrase this to a certain degree, just for brevity. This is from the Charleston Village Association. Dear BAR members, Charleston Village met with the Grace staff and Mr. Young to review this application. We are supportive of the church plans to construct a new gathering hall building. However, we have the following concerns. We fear that the building may, as designed, may overwhelm the historic church, in particular the scale and proximity of the two-story glass wall projection opposite the stained glass windows of the sanctuary's west elevation. Though Hanahan Hall to the east of the church and the new structure may not match exactly in design, we feel the height and width of the facades, as well as their setbacks from the street, should match closely, if not exactly. And then third, we ask that the handicapped entry be restudied to eliminate the raised terrace and railings of the street facade. Gathering vestibule with dual entrances at the west and south facade should rectify this problem and allow more room for a landscape buffer in the parking area to the west. We ask that these concerns be considered as the board reviews and makes their recommendations. Thank you for consideration. Sincerely, Charleston Village Association BAR Committee, Philip Dufford, David Dumas, Yvonne Fortenberry, and Jim Lundy. All right, so I guess that's the end of public comment. So, Mr. Lindsay, city recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to the city staff's review. In general, we think the project is well conceived. It's a bookend to Hanahan Hall to the east, and the overall cathedral complex is deferential to the cathedral in terms of massing and the articulation of its architectural elements. To move on to our specific comments, first, to further reinforce the deferential approach to the design, the project would benefit from minor reductions in height where possible while maintaining the vertical proportions as follows. First, the vertical space between the windows on the first and second floor may be a place to reduce height, as well as at the front portion of the cornice and parapet. And the second is the second floor office ceiling height at 11' with an apparent 4 or so foot interstitial space might be reduced. With that said, I'd like to just add into the record that we have heard, I think, a fairly clear and persuasive presentation from the applicant that justifies the height of the ceilings and the height of the building that we were not privileged to in writing these. So I would encourage the board to take the applicant's comments regarding the height into consideration when looking at that staff comment. The second comment is the new construction comes close to the northwest corner of the cathedral, and staff recommends backing off the historic structure around 10 feet if possible to the face of the buttress and putting into place a protection plan prior to the work close to this Category 1 structure. And what we're referring to there specifically is the kitchen, the one-story kitchen, which is in the very close to the rear of the building that comes very close to the existing cathedral where it is on the ground planes. That's what we're referring to. And to maybe clarify that, if you'll permit, I might just briefly go back to a plan so that we can highlight that. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you can see right here, that specific area, we feel it might be best if you could back away from it a little bit. And moving to back to third comment. There is a slightly more elaborate cornice at the setback portion of the building and the lowered portion of the addition to the east, that should be simplified and minimized to be similar to that of the addition's main body. And that's on A204. And if I may just attempt to find that, we're referring to this, this cornice right here. And it's a minor detail, but perhaps it could be simplified to be more like the main addition's cornice. And with those comments, the staff recommendation is for conceptual approval.
Okay. Any applicant clarification or response to either public comment or the city's comments?
There we go. Public comment, I would just say that Grace Church has always been a very welcoming community, and we do think that it's important to bring the handicap access to the front of the building.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, well, moving on then to board discussion.
Well, Jay, I'll go. This is James. This church is a very welcoming community. I have many friends that go there, and their commitment to this project and commitment to maintaining the church throughout history has been second to none. But as you've stated several times, our job here is to look at the architectural portion of it and not the programming portion of it. And the cathedral is magnificent. And I believe that the addition overwhelms the cathedral. It's an amazing structure, and I believe that blocking large portions of the cathedral from view as you're looking, northeast on Wentworth Street, standing maybe in front of where the Croft Building is now, or even more to the west of that, you lose this structure completely conceals that view unless you're looking straight down between the two buildings. I also, look at the distance between the proposed structure and the cathedral, and the distance between the cathedral and the building to the east. And if I look at it straight on, there seems to be less area in between the proposed structure and the cathedral and the structure to the east. It looks exactly like what Ms. Carter says. And I realized, Jay, you had prompted her to get off her letter, and she just kind of ad-libbed this, but it does look like the goal is to take advantage of all to maximize all building property opportunities and put as big a structure there as you can get. And now I do also want to make clear the detailing on the addition, I think, also looks good. And I like the glass. It's just that it's adjacent to a Category 1 structure, and it seems difficult for me to kind of appreciate the blocking of that cathedral visually.
Okay, Mr. Scott, any comment?
I have no comments.
All right. Well, I'll add to this. I think the design of the structure is very elegant, although it is a matter of the site plan. What I'm concerned about more than anything else is the proximity of this addition to the cathedral itself. Over on the other side at Hanahan Hall and the Columbarium, you have a cloister that creates a room, and I am really concerned that the room that's created between this proposed addition and the cathedral itself is really going to feel more like a slot or a residual space. At that 20 some odd feet width, considering the scale of the building that frames this space, and considering that there's really nothing at its terminus other than just a blank wall of the dishwashing area, I think that there's an opportunity that has not been taken here with the character of this space. And, you know, I don't think it has to necessarily match the rather broad width of the courtyard to the east, but it's probably too close as it stands right now. So, and I think that pretty well dovetails with some of the public comment we received and what Mr. Metters was saying, but I'll just add that into the mix. Any other board comment or a motion?
I have a clarification.
Go ahead.
It's not quite correct to say that you don't see the cathedral unless you're standing right in front of it. We did study that a good amount. You pick up a good amount of the stained glass windows, and I think if you look back at the photos, the College of Charleston buildings block some of the cathedral as you come down. So I just don't think that's quite an accurate statement by Mr. Metters. I would also say this is not the largest building we could put on the site. We started there and we downplayed, we brought it down a whole lot, but that's also not accurate.
Okay. Let's stop there and get back to board discussion. Any further discussion or a motion? It's either an advantage or a disadvantage that as chair, I can't make a motion. So y'all are up. It's up to y'all now.
Yep. Well, this is Leon, and yeah, it's a tough one. But I do agree with James that it would, you know, in terms of the view and you know, the space. I believe that, yeah, that it would probably have some disruption of the view. So I'm going to try to take the lead here from James, and I'm in agreement with him. So James, I'm going to let you.
Public service.
You want me to make the motion, Leon?
You can make the motion, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would make the motion that we deny conceptual approval and incorporate, of course, the notes from the staff and board notes. And
So just to make sure I understood that correctly, it's a motion for denial, not deferral.
correct.
All right, so a denial, so
Well,
we'll
explain it to me, Jay. Explain.
So in raw terms, a denial is start over. But it sounds like from the public comment from the
I'm
city's
comfortable
recommendation.
with deferral. Yeah, I'm comfortable with deferral. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a few
Deferral.
specific issues that can be. So the motion then is deferral.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I'm comfortable with that. Yep.
Okay.
I am too.
Of conceptual approval, incorporating board and staff comments. Do you want to add anything specific regarding the scale or placement of the building in accordance with your commentary?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't think I can do that.
Okay, so we have a motion then for deferral of conceptual approval, incorporating board and staff comments. Mr. Scott, do you second?
I will second.
All right, so Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
I in favor.
Mr. Scott?
Yeah, in favor.
I will vote yay in favor, so the motion carries 3-0.
But thank you for that clarification, Jay.
Yeah, I think probably there were about four hearts that stopped completely there for a second.
Yep. No, that was the intent. That was the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. All right, I guess we can move on.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will move on to our next item. So this is agenda item number 4, which I presume that all of you are familiar with. This is 4 to 6 Gadsden Street. And this is a request for final approval for new construction of 4 townhouses. This is in Charleston Village. It's a 3-story height district. And of course, it's in the old and historic district. Many of you know this site. As I said, you probably reviewed it before in your sessions. An historic building stood here, which fell a number of years ago. I had the sad privilege of actually being there when the various stages of collapse happened on this building. Coincidentally, I remember it was a very, very cold day. This site was a challenging one for the historic foundation. The building is no longer there. So this is just a view from the corner of Gadsden and Dufane. This is a catty corner to the site, looking toward the Ashley River, looking back toward the center of downtown. The site is on your left. And because, again, this is final, we'll just briefly review the previous motion, which is preliminary approval with staff comments, with one exception. And the board comments were that brick is an improvement and that the cast stone at the parapet may not be necessary. The board also agreed with all the staff comments and the staff recommendation. And they agreed that it does not need to be stone at the parapet. So with that said, we will move to the applicant's presentation.
All right, I believe I just promoted Joe Smith to an applicant, and you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you have it. Joe is here, but he's still muted.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt, thank you for your presentation. Moving on to
a very efficient presentation for a final final review. Alex, perhaps you could unmute Mr. Schmidt if he's having trouble unmuting himself.
I'm clicking on where it says ask to unmute, and he's still muted. Maybe it's stalled on his end somehow. Let me try putting him back as an attendee and bringing him back in. Maybe that'll help. Joe, you're back as a panelist, so you should be able to unmute yourself.
And Alex, I'm just texting him and not getting a positive indication that he is present in that way. It says that he is not in the meeting, so we may want to see if we can reach out to him by phone or encourage him to call in by phone. Apologies, everyone. This is the nature of virtual meetings. Bear with us for a moment while we have our attendee.
I've got his number here. I can call him if that's helpful.
You may want to go ahead and do that, and then,
Okay.
and then in the meantime, we will.
I'll mute myself.
Great, thank you, Alex. And I'm going to continue to try on my end to see if we can get Mr. Schmidt on audio and camera.
Jacob, would you consider just moving forward to the next one and then coming back to Joe?
If we can't, I'll wait on Alex, Lawrence, and we're all working simultaneously here to get in touch with Joe. If we can't get him in just one moment, certainly we'll move to our next item. But if y'all don't mind, maybe bear with us for just another minute while we work through our tech issue.
yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you all. having moved 5 board meetings online, you think we would have these things all ironed out, but sometimes even our best efforts will stumble occasionally. I can see Alex has him on phone, so we'll bear with it, and I'm sure we'll get him here shortly.
Okay, I just spoke to Joe and he's going to call in and then I will allow him to speak.
Great.
I see where he's called in and Joe, I've allowed you to speak. And then Joe, if you can log out on your Zoom so it doesn't echo, that would be helpful too.
How do I do that?
So just, do you have it on your computer?
Yes.
You can also, Alex, you can also
computer off.
You could just mute it too.
Yeah, if you can just turn off
your
speakers, Joe, just or turn the volume down on your computer all the way. That'll prevent your echo.
Not talking to the brightest light bulb here. Where's the volume?
And failing all else, you could also log out, as Alex suggested.
Or if you're using a PC, in the bottom right-hand corner next to the time and date, there should be like a little like microphone thing, and you can silence the speakers there. Or turn it all the way down to 0.
Did it do anything? No. I'm very sorry. This is my daughter's laptop, so I don't know what I'm doing with it.
And you may also just want to mute yourself there, Joe, on your actual Zoom on your computer in the upper right-hand corner of yours. You should have a mute, or in the lower left-hand of your Zoom terminal, you should have a mute button. If you hit that as well, you should be good to go. And the echo doesn't seem too terrible on my end, so I'll defer to Mr. Chair if you want to proceed.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get going.
Might help if I back up.
It sounds good on our end.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and proceed.
All right, I apologize. The first item that we were not able to address was 4B. There is a pier that was described as a historic pier. It is not a historic pier. It was put in perhaps in the, when I went back and looked at it, I'd say 1960s to 1980s. It's a modern brick, painted. It was in a, it was, what they did is they punched a hole in the original wall. That's a good picture right there that you have. It also shows up on screen 11. Might be actually better. Okay, what you're looking at on the top picture is a very small brick panel in the retaining wall system, where all the other brick panels in the entire wall around the property are historic, and they're all equally about 8 feet. That particular brick inset panel is only about 3 feet, and it's new brick. It returns and goes in and goes to that pier. That pier aligned with the house that was torn down, so that driveway is only about 8 feet wide. If you look at screen 56,
And Mr. Schmidt, I don't have that same number. Oh, okay, there we go. I see your numbering system. Which number was that you were requesting?
56.
So I don't have those numbers in the same way. In my lower right-hand corner, you can see this these page numbers. I had 73, 74, 75.
Oh, okay.
Perhaps you could give me some direction there.
It's the Fire Protection Plan by HLA, and it's their sheet 9 of 14.
Understood. And if you give me just one moment, Mr. Schmidt, I will go to that slide, which is much further down in our slideshow.
And I'll start describing it. The city fire department requires a 20-foot opening to get into this site, since we've got multiple residences, and particularly the isolated residence back in the corner, which is 4 Gadsden. This is HLA's drawing, not our drawing.
So, Mr. Schmidt, what I'm going through here are the slides that were given to us, and so if you want to just guide me through through the sequence in terms of which one you'd like to see.
Number 4. I'm sorry, number 9.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
There you go.
There we go.
Do you see the dotted lines? That's what we were required to be able to pull a fire truck in there and battle the fire for 4 Gadsden. So our point is, we cannot leave that pier there. That pier is also not in line with the rest of the retaining wall. It's been set inward for a prior gate. We really don't have a choice here. So to recap, it's not historic, and it is not functional for a multi-family developed site. And we apologize for that. Our response for number 5, which was to take the skylight off of the roof of the stair that goes to the roof. We could do that, but it won't lower the roof at all. We've lowered it as much as possible, and it's set back far enough from the site, from Buffane Street, that as we talked about this in the first BAR meeting, when the board decided this was a feature that could remain, we don't believe it's going to be visible. Item number 6, they asked us to remove a window from the west elevation, and we did that. Item number 7, they asked for all the parts of the Marvin system to be aluminum without any interjection of wood pieces, and we've done that. Item number 8, we were asked to remove one of the side lights on the side doors on the porch, and we did. Item number 9, we're in complete agreement with, that's already done. Item number 10, clarification, that's done. Item number 11 was to not have a stucco indent between the townhouses. We need to have an indent. We can't do it in brick, but it was shown as synthetic stucco, and we've changed that to a full 3-coat 7/8 inch stucco. The question from the staff's point of view was, how durable is this item? That is a strong design element, and we did not want to get rid of that indent and have a flush wall. Item number 12 was a clarification about how the handrails and other aluminum parts were put together with a minimal amount of fasteners, and we have done that. Also included in your package is the mock-up for the actual mock-up plan, and get that approved, location, as well as we've included photographs of all the major exterior materials. I would say the biggest item of contention that I felt we had after the last meeting was that driveway pier. And again, to reiterate, it definitely has nothing to do with the rest of that wall that was built in 1852 or whenever they put it up. And its removal does not, if anything, is actually a way of enhancing what was real and leaving what's real and not creating something that was not. And because of all these echoes, I'm going to stop now and let y'all discuss it, and then I'll jump back in with any questions.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Hearing none. At this point, Joe, if you could mute all of your audio, just that'll actually just mute your phone, and then that'll stop the echo while we go through public comment, if there is any. All right, Mr. Howell, any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, well, moving on then to city comments and recommendation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going to go to our comments page here. This is a final review, as you are aware, and we have reviewed these, and the staff comments are that this iteration of the project is not that different from what the board has previously seen. The board and staff comments have been almost entirely incorporated, and Mr. Schmidt did note the differences. And we have further reviewed this, to also put on the record, have further reviewed this item of the pier, which he has referred to on the northern side of the property. And we agree with the architect that in fact this is a non-historic element in further review, and its demolition is appropriate. So we recommend final approval.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt, any clarification to what Mr. Lindsay just said? I assume not, but let me know if so. All right, well, hearing none, we'll go on to board discussion and a motion.
Mr. Chair, Leon, I'll make a motion if it's okay with y'all.
Yep.
Me?
Make a move for final approval.
And I will second that.
All right, so we have a motion made and seconded for final approval. Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Aye, in favor.
And Mr. Scott?
Yeah, in favor.
I vote yay in favor, so the motion carries 3-0. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, members of the board. if you are ready, we can go ahead and move on to our fifth and final item.
Yep, let's do it.
Very good. Agenda item number 5. This is 194 Cannon Street, which is a hotel. This is conceptual approval request for new construction of a 175-room hotel. This is in a height district of 85, 125, and in the Old City District. You have reviewed this once before. As a refresher, this site sits in between the 2 lanes of the Septima Clark Parkway. What is labeled Cannon Street on the south and then Spring Street on the north. It is located also strategically in between the medical districts to the south and the West Edge development to the north, as well as the Gadsden Green neighborhood and the West Side neighborhood to the north. These are a few photos of the site. You can see this Loslong former fast food building, which served, I think, in many iterations as a number of different fast food brands. This is viewing to the south. You can see the MUSC parking deck to the left and the B Street lofts, the Comfort Inn on the right. Looking across the site, you can see its current condition, and this is looking toward the West Edge development. And this is just a shot of the site here, which is on your left, facing the MUSC parking garage directly in front of you. Now, to review just briefly the previous motion, which was denial of the application for conceptual approval, including the staff and board comments. That was back June 10th. And the board comments were that the height, scale, and mass works, but the general architectural direction does not. We need a building and not a sculpture. Can be started over for general architectural direction, but not with the scale. The proposal is scaleless and does not enhance the area, and agreed with staff. The staff noted it was unfortunate the city agreed to the PUD in regard to the mass and height, and think about a flat iron building to make a statement and deny the conceptual approval. They also noted that it's a gateway, it has a strong sort of corporate design, and agree with the comments there. Nothing additional to add, agreed with prior comments. So this was a widespread sort of sense that the architectural design was not on point in the previous version. And with that said, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, for the applicant's presentation.
Okay, Alex, who is giving the presentation?
Got a couple of different applicant speakers. I think some of them will be together. Let me see if I can find them all. Okay. I think should all be now panelists and can unmute and turn on the camera.
Are we good?
You're good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm Richard Gow with LS3P here with Jeffrey Rendering, and our client is listening in, as are a couple of other team members here. I would say that after a denial like we had, we would like to ask the chair for some extra time to go through some of the details of what we're doing to make sure that we get real clear. I think adding an extra 10 minutes would be asking for much, but it might take more than 15. So I just want to do that. And
somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes.
Yeah,
you got it.
I also want to thank you for your service. We know how difficult this has been just from getting people on, and we know what our town is going through and how important it is to kind of keep business and other things going forward. And with Mr. Dowd leaving, that's double because of changing. So what we're going to try to do as much as possible is try to keep this contextual, because there is certainly a different team that's doing this, and Jacob knows what he's doing. But for the purpose of setting that context, you know, we were denied last time. 15 or 20 people wrote in. It was a resounding kind of rejection by the populace as to how the building looked. And but I do want to take away some positives from last meeting, because we had to grow on what we had to begin with. And we were told that the building needed to relate more to the character of Charleston, and it wasn't a question of contemporary or traditional. We feel that a lot of the work that we've done has been to create detailing that is contemporary, but it's rooted in the principles of Charleston BAR architecture. We do have shutter-like screens next to our windows. We still have a glassy base, but the base has been handled differently with columns that meet the ground. We were told in item 4 of the staff comments that the material palette was really of a very good quality. So we didn't change anything there, except to maybe not have some of the fins that we did. We were also, and this is a point, we were offered conceptual approval by Mr. Dowd as a staff recommendation for height and mass. And that's very important because with a site of this size and the building footprints of what we have, that's very important that we can rely on that going forward. And he said the height and mass were well conceived. So we received conceptual approval of 2 out of the 4 prongs of that test, and we know that it's not a buy entitlement at all. It still has to meet the way you feel about it. We gave it a complete relook, and we acknowledge, as Mr. White professed, that it has to be a building, and it has to work with the BAR principles. And in order to be a building, we felt like we had to go to the root of the elements of the building, and you'll see a lot of studies from Mr. Rendering to help build this large facade from the kernel of the fenestration and how that was extrapolated into an articulate piece of architecture. We are rooted in the 21st century. And I think, just to be clear, there are 16 principles. I'm going to run through them really quickly. But we would hope that during this process, if we are going awry, in your opinion, on one of these things, just use the principle as a way of communicating that so we can focus. Principle number 1, higher ceiling heights, we have that. Principle number 2, a high quality tactile and visual experience to the passerby. We have added a layer at the ground floor with columns. They suggest an arcade, and I think Michael Maher's letter to you will confirm that. The base should be taller. We have increased the base 3 feet to cheat into the second floor to increase that. Vertical orientation principle, everything we did here was to increase the vertical, but not too vertical. Work in harmony with surrounding buildings. As the surrounding buildings are of different places and different sizes, we did the best we can and to articulate a public realm where we have pedestrian activity. The visual appearance of parking lots and garages does not apply to this property. The court that we have outside will be very well appointed. The street life on the sidewalk will be supported. The ground floor has been enhanced, and it has architectural features to add scale. The Charleston building should have authenticity. Mr. Dowd had said that the material palette was of good quality. The authenticity of construction should be supported. We have very few materials, and we tried to keep the building very legible and very simple, since the last one was busy and jarring and a lot of other nasty things that people said. The harmony of the building facades and the streetscape should be enhanced. The hotel is an isolated building. It doesn't have a streetscape like King Street. We're not fitting into adjacent facades. So we created a harmonious relationship between the smaller forms and the larger forms. Buildings, for the principle about energy efficiency, we have clear glazing, it's low E. We do have lots of vertical windows. The proportions are 2.75 to 1. The size and frequency of windows, Jeffrey will get into. We do a good job of that, I believe. The smaller windows are above on the top floor, like a lot of buildings that we love in Charleston. We do have mullions in our windows. We do have deeply recessed windows with the added window surrounds to create not only a Charleston approach to dealing with windows, but that added depth. Only a couple left. We will add detail in preliminary to the base and to their canopies. And the Charleston tradition of adopting climate mitigating elements. We have roof overhangs, we have arcades, we have pieces that feel like porches, we have pieces that feel like shutters. And all of those things are very good. They helped us in assessing our own approach to general architectural direction and scale. And I believe that we've done a good job and we've had a lot of help here. So thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Rich. If you could advance a couple slides, we can get started in here. Mr. Lindsay did a great job giving an overview. I'll make these kind of quick. The Sanborn map kind of shows that the site and the context surrounding us is very new. Next slide. Again, as you stated, Cannon's to the south and Spring Street is to the north, kind of segregating our site from the west edge and the Meckel district to the south of us. Next slide, please. A couple of photos that you've already seen and you will see again with the building superimposed in. One image I want to call attention to is the bottom right, the view of the existing landscape buffer that the park that is adjacent to ours to the west is already existing, obviously, but we will also be enhancing this as we go forward. Next slide, please. A couple of different views from Cannon Street in the top upper left and upper right is the view from Spring Street as you leave in town. Next slide, please. At last time, we received some comments to include photos of a physical model to help show the building and show it in its context. As you can see, again, it's very isolated from the context around us to the west and to the southeast. The massing is very simple, obviously, in this 3D form, this physical model, due to the scale. Next slide, please. Streetscape, as Rich said, that height and mass were approved conceptually at the prior design. We did not play with the height, although we did kind of relook at the mass as we restudied the design. Continue, please. So here's a site comparison. I don't know if you can zoom in, but if not, we'll move to the next slide here. But although we were denied previously, the site concept was really well conceived. So as we restudied, thank you. As we restudied the massing and the design here, we took additional steps to enhance the site plan and delineate the pedestrian experience along the Spring Street side by further studying the building to the south, creates a greater landscape buffer, and also reworking the program in the upper right corner of the site here allows us to have a more generous courtyard at that corner.
And the porch on Cannon.
And the porch on Cannon to the south, which we'll see further on, invites as they're approaching from the park to enter our site there and leave the street side. Next slide, please. A couple of precedents we wanted to look at on these next few slides. Each show a clear and defined base metal top. They each have deep set windows, vertical proportions, along with a horizontal rhythm. Mr. Dowd, in his previous comments, mentioned the Dewberry Hotel as being a good precedent for us to take a look at. It has lots of repetitive windows and a clear defined top. And the actual penthouse there is pushed back and very glassy and clear and a very defined base. Next slide, please. A couple other ones we wanted to look at. The West Edge and Spectator do a great job of showing step down mass concealing a taller tower to the pedestrian frontage, something that we took into consideration on our east and west facades. And then the Middleton Inn, I think, is a very great precedent to look at for many projects, but it's very interesting as we studied it for the fenestration, which has been set on the grid and actually works at varying scales. So as you step back, each window kind of works together as one giant kind of window and fenestration move. And as you get closer, you can see how it's been divided up into a grid. Next slide, please. So moving forward, we're going to go through a series of studies that influence our design and kind of build off of the principles, the Charleston principles that Rich mentioned before. Next slide. So we wanted to start at the structural bay. Again, last time height and mass were approved, but architectural direction and therefore scale were not approved due to the jarring nature of our busy facade and the shifting sections that we had. So we wanted to really dive back in, sharpen our pencil, and really work hard on the scale, which can be defined by individual architectural elements. And just like middle to end, these elements should be beautiful individually, but as the greater whole as well. So looking here at the first one, you know, we looked at combining the shutter, the vertical louvers with the windows themselves, but found that the ratio was closer to 2 to 1 and not really appropriate, and felt less vertical in orientation. So as we moved from that one to B, we looked at making taller windows and isolating the vertical louvers, the shutters, from the window system itself, which gave us that 3 to 1, closer to 3 to 1 ratio. But here, the 2-height base, we studied there, but this counted due to the scale. We feel that the larger floor plan, the larger base height that Rich mentioned before already gave us a prominent base. But we also lost the ability to have a delineated top floor in that scheme. Moving on to C, we wanted to explore looking at varying the window groupings instead of just doing 2, you know, looking at doing some different moves there. But we felt that was just unnecessary complication to the middle section, and kind of going back to some of the comments received previously. So we landed at the D here. The proposed structural bay kind of design has a very clean horizontal rhythm, vertical proportions. The structure is brought to the ground, very defined base, middle, and top. And there's a subtle move of differentiating this window sizing and also shifting the shutter there at the top that helps enforce that top level. Next slide, please. So then we took that structural bay and spread it across the elevation. And this isn't necessarily a specific elevation we're looking at, but mainly on the 2 longer sides, we wanted to study this. So we felt that the horizontal rhythm and the vertical orientation of this grid reflects and reinforces the Charleston principles that we mentioned prior. The 2-story window move here reduces the overall scale of the taller structure. And by bringing the columns down to the ground, we also help reduce the scale of the building. And you can kind of see how tall they are by looking in the lower left corner. You can see some scale figures there. Next slide, please. So then we went into the individual window itself and studied that. So these next 2 slides will be studying the fenestration. This first one, we wanted to, again, go back to the roots of Charleston and look at the typology, which has a lot of expressive window surrounds, as you can see from the 2 images on the left here, just a couple that we grabbed off of King Street, which adds depth to the facade and also creates a nice play of shadow and light. But over time, you know, this surround has evolved and has actually been used by the 2 images to the right here, also been used to help control solar gain and solar heat. Sustainability practice that is inherent in all of Charleston architecture. Next slide, please. So diving into the window here, we felt that a vertical floor-to-floor window was applicable and allows for a greater depth of light to penetrate the rooms while keeping the correct proportions. So as you can see, A, B, and C here are all similar. They all look at recessing the window, the typical depth that we do in most projects at 4 inches from the face of the facade. But in this situation of building this scale, we felt that the elevation of the facade would still appear flat. So when we started D, we wanted to increase the depth, or at least the expression of the depth of the window. So we added an extruded metal frame that also helps proportions and helps call attention to that. And we also separated the louvered section as well. It became more of a shutter to the window to the left there. Next slide, please. So then we came to the west facade. Taking what we learned from the previous studies, we quickly applied it to the west facade, which you can see in A. And so prior, we've heard a lot of comments that the west facade was not inviting, did not feel Charleston, was heavy, and a little bit brutalist and more sculptural and less of a building. So as we applied the 2-story frames to that facade, you know, it didn't really keep the principles intact. It became more horizontal, became heavy, didn't feel it's Charleston. So B and C are kind of a similar study where we looked at material changes, but we also grouped full height frames of the middle section. So now we have 4 height sections there, but we still felt that it was kind of lopsided and not quite balanced, is what you'd see in typical Charleston architecture with that cantilever corner on the right. And so moving into D, we alleviated that by cutting that off and making it a lighter porch-like element that's grounded with columns. These columns are different than the other stone columns. They're round, they're made of metal potentially, and just more elegant in nature. And that really helped define the base, the middle of the top, and kind of created that welcome element to the south. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we wanted to study the fenestration on the northwest corner. So we purposely worked the program on the ground floor to have as much occupiable spaces as possible, everyday occupiable spaces as possible on the Spring Street side. So we obviously have the lobby to the east, and at this northwest corner, we have a series of office program and meeting rooms on the ground floor. So the first 2 studies, you know, were obviously in a floodplain zone. So the first 2 studies really kind of were derived out of trying to stay out of that floodplain with window fenestration. And it just felt really foreign, felt forced. We don't really have any horizontal expressions like that in the building. And B, the square windows also felt foreign. Then we moved into C, which also keeps above that datum line, still felt too squarish, didn't feel appropriate. Sorry, that was C, I think I might have said D. And D and E, we felt are the 2 kind of most applicable studies here. But D kind of took away from the base definition and looked too similar to the middle section. So it was kind of taken away from enhancing that base element. So in E, which I'm hoping you can see better in your screen, is a little bit washed out in ours. You can see a series of 3 vertical slot windows that also kind of represent or replicate those you'll see at the top floor where we have that program and where we can open them. And keep it into, you know, the conversation of honesty. We didn't want to add additional windows into the back of house spaces that would just need to be spandrel elements. So we wanted to stay honest with our expression. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into our proposed design through a series of renderings with some comparisons from prior to the new. If you can move forward 1 slide. So I think right at the bat, you can see a vastly improved building. We really like how the building reads the approach from Cannon Street connector. It's much lighter, meets the ground, it's anchored, it's inviting to the pedestrian on the right side through that porch element. You can move to the next slide to see a larger rendering of that. The play of the 2 forms is actually kind of interesting here, where you have the larger, taller structure behind and a 2-to-1 ratio with its own kind of porch element and then the lower mass that is at a height that feels more appropriate to Charleston as you enter in. Next slide, please. So here you can see the comparison at the bridge as you enter from West Ashley. Again, building is drastically improved. It feels lighter. It's more simplified. You can see on the left there the busyness, the jarring kind of nature of the moving planes, the darker element, darker skin. And on the right, it feels brighter. Move forward 1 more slide. That a little bit up close and personal. The ground floor here is pushed back, which provides us ample room for additional landscaping. It also kind of reduces the heaviness of that ground floor. Next slide, please. So here you see the comparison at Spring Street as you're heading out of town. You know, again, I think the east and west facades were the most successful from what we heard last time, but we felt like we still improve upon them. And so the new design, you can see a smaller form, that smaller 6-story mass wrapping along Spring Street there. And again, it brings the scale of the overall building down to the pedestrian level and to something more familiar to Charleston. But they're both kind of identify themselves as separate forms. The glassy corners also make it kind of light and inviting. They are not cantilevered, there are round columns, similar to what you'll see on the porch on the south side. If you go to the next slide, it might seem a little clearer there. Maybe you can move to the next slide.
Just two more.
Just a couple more here. This is a new one that you have not seen before, the approach from Haygood. You can, I think it's a very elegant look from the side. You can see the full length of the facade, and similar to the Charleston Aquarium, where the two ends are very light and airy to a solid kind of white mass. We again have that glassy corner to the left of the lower mass, and the glassy porch-like element to the taller mass on the right. We had at the cant of the building here in the middle, you'll see a glass hyphen that is also located at the vertical circulation. So as you get off the elevator and the stairs, you have great views to the north and to Wagner Terrace area. Next slide, please. Similar view of the Cannon Street courtyard, and you can, I think right away you see how this building is much more inviting. The glass floor reads very bright and intriguing to pull the pedestrian in. The canopy is anchored by these vertical fins. If you go to the next slide, it'll probably be a little easier to see, which also help kind of differentiate the east side of the taller tower from the west. Again, the porch-like element on the south side there, on the left side of your screen is a welcome gesture to the MUSD campus side. Next slide. And this is the last one we'll end on, where you can see that porch-like element kind of sliding past through the facade of the lower mass and becomes a hyphen at the taller building. But again, I think as we saw and walk through that the principles have been met in a very creative way. We're very excited about this building, and we feel like it's a great direction and a great new building for that landscape. Rich, you want to add anything?
No, I think that's good. We'll just take questions now. We're out of time.
We're out of time. Thanks.
All right. Any questions from the board or staff? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. Alex, who do we have lined up?
We'll start with Anna Catherine Carroll.
Thank you. Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society really appreciates the applicant reaching out to us, and we feel the project has taken a step in the right direction. Specifically, we feel positive changes have been made to enhance the activation and treatment of the ground floor with the use of storefront, and the simplified design approach and material palette are significant improvements to the overall architectural direction. However, we feel this could be refined even further. We continue to struggle with the proposed use of a VTAC system that requires a significant amount of aluminum screening, which is our primary concern with this project. We feel the bulky, dark screens adjacent to the windows adversely impact the design of the facades by introducing a competing exterior feature. And we ask that other systems be explored for a more elegant design solution better suited to Charleston. In particular, the top floor we feel needs significant study where the VTAC screening dividing the windows creates a pattern that is jarring in relation to the rhythm of the rest of the building. We would also ask for further study of the projecting lower mass at the northeast corner of the building. Specifically, we do not find treating it in the same architectural language as the main mass works very well. And we feel the approach to differentiating the 6-story piece on the south elevation to read as a lighter porch-like element is very successful, and we would like to see similar thought go into properly differentiating the northeast portion as well. So we would ask that the board defer this request primarily for study of options that would eliminate the VTAC system as proposed. Thank you.
Okay, now we have Will Hamilton.
Thank you, Alex. This is Will Hamilton again with the Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd also like to thank the applicant for allowing us to review the updated design prior to this afternoon's hearing. We feel as though there are a number of positive changes worth noting, including the additional perspective renderings the adjustments to the building's footprint to allow for a broader buffer at Cannon Street, the photos of the scale model, and the detailing of the 6-story corner, what I'm going to refer to as the bump out facing Spring Street. So previously we commented that the contemporary nature of the design was not problematic and that we wanted to see something that was not as brand driven. We still want to see the design that's iconic and that speaks to Charleston architecture. So while the current iteration of this design has been updated, we feel that it still doesn't speak to Charleston architecture, and we would not consider it to be a gateway building at this point. There are a number of items we feel need additional study moving forward before this application receives conceptual approval. We feel the corner bump out portions would be better suited proportionally if they were included as 8-story masses as opposed to 6-story masses. Ideally, these would both be detailed similarly to the current 6-story mass facing Spring Street. We prefer to see the top 3 stories below the rooftop space treated as a refined glass cornice or top to the building that doesn't include quite as much masonry in that area. We feel the overhang of the rooftop element is too prominent and should be minimized along with the wood elements. In general, the rooftop space we feel should be sleeker and more refined. Overall, we feel the window fenestration could also be more consistent. And finally, we'd like the applicant to restudy the design of the VTAC grills to include something more visually interesting. So in general, we feel there are too many elements that need to be restudied for us to make a recommendation for conceptual approval. So we'd recommend that the board defer this application to give the design team an opportunity to address the previously mentioned items. Thank you.
Okay. Alex, any other verbal public comment that you're aware of?
No other verbal public comment, just the written comments.
Okay, well, then I will move on to those. And again, I'll paraphrase to some extent just for brevity. The first letter we've received from Kevin Everly on President Street, and this is addressed to Dennis Dowd. Dear Dennis, I will be unable to attend the BAR large meeting. I'd like to register my strong opposition to the plans of the hotel on Cannon Street. When the project was submitted earlier, it was correctly rejected as a 3-dimensional advertisement instead of the gateway building. While the current proposal is admittedly unbranded, it is still equally uninspired. The building needs to be far better than average and distinct. I would make this challenge: describe the proposal's architecture in a few sentences and post the elevations for this hotel and the last 4 hotels built downtown on a bulletin board. Then ask whether someone could confidently pick this hotel out of the lineup based on nothing more than hearing your description of it. No one could. There's nothing interesting about this building. No notable feature, no interesting form, no marquee details. A rectangular box with regularly spaced windows. We deserve better. Sincerely, Kevin. Now moving on to some other comments. This one from Kiki Caparo. Charleston does not need another hotel. Okay, this is really a criticism of use, so I'm going to skip that. Another one from Robert Greninger. And please don't allow an 11-story hotel project. Charleston does not need another eyesore. Look at what happened to Shem Creek. And then a third from William Reel. I disagree that the proposed design is an improvement, rejecting contemporary building design in favor of monotonous, repetitive, boringly safe designs. Only creates a cityscape of buildings that no one pays attention to. Cities that have a vibrant mix of architectural styles in their non-historic districts are exciting to live in. Please stop making the mistakes of other cities with a rich architectural history by watering down any new design. And then the final correspondence is from Michael Maher, the CEO of the West Edge Foundation. Please accept the following responses to the updated design proposals for 194 Cannon. We concur with various voices that the redevelopment of the site presents a unique opportunity, an important, challenging location. The resubmitted conceptual design continues to be responsive to this opportunity. We have been perplexed by conflicting assertions that the site requires a signature building, yet those same voices are concerned that the designs have been too assertive. We continue our enthusiasm for collaborating with the design team on bringing forth positive investment in the west side of the Charleston Peninsula. and look forward to seeing a contributory project that helps facilitate community connectivity, economic development, and the other benefits improvements to the site can bring. And that is all the written correspondence. So, Mr. Lindsay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will move on to the city comments. Generally speaking, due to this prominent site, this building is deserving of the board's highest level of scrutiny. And since the previous submittal, the design has improved significantly, but the architectural expression still needs further refinement. As previously noted, the building's height and disposition have been predetermined by its zoning classification as a planned unit development. And then just to go into our detailed comments, the first thing is that the facade design should be further unified and simplified throughout, integrating the smaller masses with the larger mass. Second, the window and wall system that is illustrated before and has been discussed needs some further refinement to simplify the recesses and protrusions of elements. The relationships of the planes of these elements needs to be restudied, and rendering should be shown accurately depicting the depth and shadow of the exterior wall. Stated in the principles, thicker walls with deeply set windows are more appropriate in Charleston to better fit in with the language of the more significant and larger masonry structures, which I think the applicants did speak to. The third comment is that regarding the treatment of the base, the facade's vertical grid elements should retain their width all the way to the ground where shown. The applicants have done this, I will add for the record. Visually transferring the mass of the building to grade, this tectonic expression should apply to both the primary and secondary masses. And what we're really saying there is that the staff feel that the cantilevering elements on the smaller secondary masses still would be more effective if they transferred their weight all the way to the ground. And the fourth thing is that we still would like to see a simplification of the material palette, currently indicating aluminum storefront, metal panel, extruded metal frame, curtain wall glazing, centered stone, perforating VTAC screen, and wood. So continuing simplification would be a benefit. The staff recommendation is for deferral of the general architectural direction. And I would also like to put onto the record that, as I think you've heard from the architects, they have listened closely, both to the public comment, to the board comment last time, and they have read the principles and they have responded to them. This design process is moving in the right direction. The staff simply think it needs to continue that refinement. And with that, I'll end staff comment.
Great. Okay. And now an opportunity for an applicant response to both public comment and staff comment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. White. As far as the VTACs go, we feel that the VTAC screens are an opportunity to add texture and scale. And as we move into further design development, this is something that we feel really can become a shutter-like element that is a positive and reinforces a hierarchy of design. The second thing, the call for the overhang thickness on the roof, we believe that an appropriate shade on the top floor of an outdoor space that's some 12 feet in length could probably be worked out in some 12 to 15 inches of thickness and could easily be reduced. We feel that the two items that Mr. Lindsay spoke to, I wanted to make sure we were clear on. We do have columns underneath the cantilevers. What we elected to do is on the most pedestrianized corners, actually not have the thick columns, but have smaller round columns and not have those appear like cantilevers. And I guess the last statement I would make in furthering what Jacob said was, we are very committed to meeting with people. We have met with the historical groups 2 times since the last meeting in 2 months, and would have met with Mr. Dowdmore if he wasn't so frantically trying to exit. And I give him a lot of credit. He has a busy thing to do. So we could not be more committed. And as last time, having an approval with conditions is still an acceptable action of this board. And I think that we are very sincere in saying that we will make every effort to adopt and build the consensus that this body has demanded of us over the years. Thank you.
Okay. moving on to board discussion and or a motion.
So Jay, I have a question.
I've got.
Go ahead, Leon.
No, you go ahead. I'll wait.
No,
you go ahead.
Okay. So Jay, just a question. At our previous meeting, there was no approval for anything, right? Scale and general architectural direction was denied.
That's correct. The denial was specific to scale and general architectural direction, but the board made no corresponding motion to also approve specifically any other element of the proposal.
Correct. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Jay, could I hear your comments?
My comments?
Yeah.
Well, it's a little, it's awfully polite of you. I agree with much that has been said about the level of refinement. You know, the project has matured, but it, in my view, has not really reached a point where it's ready for conceptual approval, considering its potential landmark status. I don't really see the conflict between having a prominent sort of landmark building and one that was too architecturally aggressive. The architectural direction of the previous proposal, we've spoken about that, but while the principles have been referred to quite extensively, it's also been somewhat superficial in that, all these principles have been applied and they are all features of classic Charleston architecture, but the result does not really have much association with even the local precedents that are shown. So I agree with the staff recommendation.
Could I got a couple comments. This is Leon Scott. I want to, first, I agree. There's been improvement, but it certainly needs more refinement. You mentioned that it was a high quality experience from the passerby. I disagree with that. And also, you mentioned that it worked in harmony with the surrounding buildings. I disagree with that as well. You had mentioned something about using the Dewberry and a couple of other hotels downtown as examples and so forth. I want to keep in mind that the Dewberry was a government building, so the exterior still exists as it was. And lastly, it just doesn't reinforce the true Charleston character. It's far from that. So I could not give a conceptual approval. I just don't see, I think we're moving in the right direction, but I don't think we're there yet. That's it.
The essence of what Leon, Jay, and Jacob have said, I'm in agreement with. And Jay, I would make a motion for the deferral of the scale and general architectural direction.
And I will second that.
Would you wish to include staff and board comments?
Yes. Please excuse me for not saying that with staff and board comments. Excuse me.
So we have a motion for deferral of scale and general architectural direction, including staff and board comments. Mr. Scott, you seconded that, correct?
I second that, correct.
Okay, made and seconded. So Mr. Metters, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Scott?
I vote yay in favor.
I will as well vote yay in favor. The motion carries 3-0. Mr. Lindsay, that was our last application, correct?
Right.
That was the last application, and there are no more slides in this 231 slideshow. So
it's a short one.
233 slideshow. So that will conclude, and I will stop our screen share.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you all. Y'all.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, meeting is adjourned, and I will see y'all in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Take care, Dave.
All right. Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.